What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at super micro computer stock, ticker symbol SMCI, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Tuesday, March 12th. Alright guys, SMCI stock here today down $59.79 a share. That's minus 5.24% in regular trading hours. It is down about another just under 9 points after hours. Listen, as always, if you're new here, first of all, please subscribe to the channel. But if you've been watching a little while, you'll hear me say this a lot. After hours, you have to take it with a grain of salt. This big candle, it was 10,000 shares, sure, but it was one candle. The rest of the candles, we're looking at a couple hundred shares of volume in the after hours. It is so easy to bully stocks, and pump stocks for that matter, even that have larger market caps, in the after hours for big players. So always take after hours with a grain of salt. But let's get started here on Super Micro today, doing our daily ritual, our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. Really quick, guys, if you're looking to try to expedite your journey as a trader, I think you'll find our private group incredibly helpful. It's at that link in the pinned comment. Hope to see you join. So what are we looking for here, right? Well, we're really looking to pull out bias out of the market. How do we get bias? Well, we get different changes in volume that correlate with obvious moves in stock price, but are out of context of what is usually expected at that time of day. For example, bears, that's a big red candle right off the open, right? But see the volume candle? It wasn't a million shares. That's very contextual to what we may expect on any given day. I mean, granted, on Friday, we saw 340,000 shares. Today, we saw about 270,000 shares. That's well within reason. So listen, if you're on a chat room tonight and you see some bears talking about, wow, did you see that big dump off the open on tremendous volume? Contextually speaking, the tremendous volume part is not really actually, it doesn't really align with my opinion, I suppose. I guess tremendous volume is kind of subjective, but if we're comparing it to recent days, it's not all that tremendous. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of wash that opening candle. The next moves that I'm interested in really are going to be this downside fade and then this recovery. That's really it here on SMCI today. The rest was kind of a little bit more of consolidation throughout the day. And truthfully, we did see a couple of pops in that downside move and a couple of pops, or really one pop in that downside move and a couple of pops in that recovery. But this fade downside on average is within reason. And you guys know, I like to see at least 3 to 4 candles that have consistent higher volume out of context and are consecutive. The most we got here was 2. I think this would be a force today to say, okay, there's really a good sample size opinion that we can pull out of SMCI today. So bears, I apologize. I wish I had a little better news. And bulls, on a day where the stock is down about 5%, I would take it as positive that we don't have overwhelming, obvious, huge sample size opinions that SMCI belongs lower. Now let's move on here and take a look at the obvious psychological self-fulfilling prophecy levels that I'm watching incredibly closely tomorrow, starting with the most obvious indicators, the 200 period and the 50 period moving averages on a very popular time frame, the 30-minute chart. There's a lot of eyeballs looking at this, so let's take a look. Over the weekend video, or on the weekend video, if you caught that, what we discussed was that Super Micro was kind of right in between this channel here on the 30-minute chart, between the 200 period and the 50 period. We gave that up here today as the 200 period came higher and the stock did give it up on high volume off the open. And then we came up and tried to test it and then kind of faded back, closing below as the 200 period continued to rise. But we're now left in a really interesting spot. Both of those moving averages are incredibly close together. They're within about 10 points of each other on a stock that's over $1,000. So bulls, that leaves us with an interesting opportunity on this chart. It is about a 3.2% move away to reclaim or at least test the 50 period. But one thing to consider is that we may see that 50 period cross over beneath the 200 period, which in my opinion, in and of itself is not entirely meaningful, but I want to see whichever moving average is higher tomorrow get reclaimed. That way we can reclaim both. So let's assume that this is how it looks tomorrow. It will look different, but let's just assume for argument's sake that this is how it looks. We come up, we break through the 200 period, we bust through the 50 period on high volume, we come back down and retest that higher moving averages, which in this case is the 50, on average to below average volume, and then a high volume pull away upside. Okay, that would require a little bit more of a volatile day, but today was 5.24%. We're talking about a 3% upside move. Now, bears, your story here on the 30-minute chart. You guys would probably like to see that 50 period crossover lower, just because that could probably get lower quicker, of course, than the 200 period could. And then whichever moving average is lower at the time of the test, any retest of the lower moving average, you guys want to see a hard high volume rejection back downside. Okay, because I mean, really, you guys have your sights set heading down toward that really obvious level of $1,000, which we'll get to. Now let's move on and take a look and see if the 4 hour is in play, and it is here. Okay, let's take a look. Now, we discussed this over the weekend on the weekend video. Do you bulls remember what we discussed? I said on the 4 hour chart, I want to see that 50 period get above $1,000 a share, and guess what? It did, because that 50 period is just another psychological barrier that can help to beef up that ever so important $1,000 a share psychological level. It's a huge, huge level. And now that additional psychological barrier is above there. It tends to, in my experience, it's not like a double up in terms of strength. You know, you may see a 30 to 50% increase in strength when you are dealing with a big, powerful moving average like the 50 period on the 4 hour chart. So bulls, really obvious here for you guys on the 4 hour chart. Any downside test of that 50 period, you know, we are sitting currently approximately 6.5% downside move away. So, you know, ideally you wouldn't necessarily want to see a retest, but if we do see a retest of that 50 period here on the 4 hour chart, being that it's just ahead of $1,000 a share, you're going to want to see a hard high volume bounce. Just get away from that level as soon as possible, right? And close higher from that level, of course, into the close. Not necessarily a close, obviously below, but also not really right up against it either. Bears, remember, it is a little bit of a big ask. You're asking for a 7% move essentially, but you guys would love to see a close back beneath that 50 period, because that would also set us up for a close beneath $1,000 a share potentially, which we'll get to here on the daily chart. But bulls also, what I'm paying attention to here on the 4 hour, I would love to see that psychological barrier, what could act as a potential support, that 50 period, the white line, right, moving as high as possible. But granted, it is on the 4 hour chart, so it's going to move a little bit slower, but the higher that thing can get, as long as the stock is above it, the better, in my opinion. Now, the most important chart of all, the daily. This is the most contextual and paints the most clear picture here. You can see the moving averages are not relevant, okay? But this paints the most clear image, right? The psychological levels. Here's what I'm looking at. Really, I'm looking at 2 levels, but we have to open it up for 3, knowing the volatility history of this name. First of all, $1,000, bulls. Priority number 1, do not give up $1,000 a share, ideally. At least in the very short term. Longer term, fundamentals take over, right? But in the shorter term, I don't necessarily want to see $1,000 a share given up. Bears, that's your number 1 priority, is get back below $1,000. Get this to be a 3-figure stock again, because that's how you discourage the bulls. And if you're a bear, that's your priority. Discourage as many bulls as possible. Now, the real battle here tomorrow, it's $1,100 again. Bulls, the ideal scenario here is to close above $1,100 tomorrow. Listen, I don't mind if we close at 1110. I just want to see a close above 1100 to reclaim that level that we've seen as of late turn into a relatively large, not only psychological, but also technical level. And bears, you guys have it kind of easy. Ideally, a hold below $1,100 a share is kind of treading water, but that's a good sign. That increases the strength of 1100 as a potential resistance, again, at least here in the short term, which opens you up to your real goal, which is 1,000. Bulls, or below 1,000. Bulls. A break and hold of 11 is great in the interim. Well, you guys kind of have your sights set on 12, 1250, 13, right? But a break and hold of 13, or sorry, a break and hold of 11 is how we get started on that process of using that as a trampoline to get a high volume run up through 12 and try to break a new all-time high. Now, my favorite part of the video every single day, what was the volume bias in the options chain here on SMCI today? How did traders position themselves as we head into tomorrow? 142,000 total contracts traded. 82,000 of those were calls and about 60,000 of those were puts. So we are seeing a call side bias on the overall call put ratio. And if we break this down by delta range, interestingly, the at the money contracts are leaning call heavy. Okay, but the far out of the money contracts, the 0 to 20 delta range, a little less decisive. About 31,000 calls and about 33,000 puts. But still leaving us with an overall call side bias on the overall call put ratio. Listen, before you guys head out, don't forget to cast your vote in the comment section what ticker, just comment the ticker or the company name, would you like to see me cover as tomorrow, Tuesday's wildcard stock. I will count those up late tomorrow morning, and whichever ticker gets the most comments will win tomorrow, and I'll cover it. Listen, if you got value out of the video, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.